The wind was still howling in my ears when the world went silent, broken only by my husband's trembling whisper. "Pretend we're dead." Blood tasted like iron on my tongue, and the night pressed in around us with a cold that felt almost deliberate. In that darkness, one truth settled heavier than the rocks beneath. Us, our own son, had meant for this to be the end. For the past year, my husband Daniel and I had been living quietly on the far edge of Willow Ridge, a place where the mountains rose like old secrets and nights fell heavy. We thought we knew our son, the boy we raised, the man we trusted, until a series of strange behaviors began to disturb our peace. Hushed phone calls, unexplained rage, and a fear brewing behind his eyes. We didn't know what he was hiding, only that whatever it was, he didn't want us to discover it. And on the night he insisted on driving us into the mountains for a talk, something in me tightened, as if the road itself was warning us. The fog was already waiting for us when we reached the foothills. It moved like something alive, slipping across the windshield in long, pale ribbons, catching the light before dissolving into the dark. Our son didn't say a word. His hands stayed locked on the steering wheel, knuckles washed white by the headlights. Daniel reached for my hand in the back seat, but even his fingers felt unsure, like they were listening to something I couldn't hear yet. And as the road curved upward, I realized the mountain wasn't the only thing keeping quiet that night. Our son was too. We never drove this late. Not anymore. Daniel's knees ached when he sat too long, and I couldn't read road signs in the dark without squinting. But our son insisted this trip couldn't wait, said he needed to show us something important. He said it softly, like someone describing a dream they didn't want questioned. The air in the car felt thick, warmed by the vents, but cold in the spaces between us. I watched his silhouette from the back seat. Every now and then, the dash light caught his jawline, tight and unmoving. His shoulders didn't shift the way they usually did when he was comfortable. He didn't hum. He always hummed on road trips. "Long day?" Daniel tried from beside me, voice gentle. Our son didn't answer right away. The pause stretched, brushing the back of my neck. "Something like that," he finally said. The fog thinned enough for me to see his eyes in the rearview mirror. But he didn't look at me. He looked through the mirror, like he was watching the road behind us instead of the one ahead. We passed the turn for the scenic route. He never even slowed down. And that was the moment my heartbeat went quiet in my ears, the way it does when you realize something isn't what it was promised to be. The mountain road narrowed, the guardrail bending beside us like a thin silver ribbon. The trees grew taller, closer, as though they wanted to hear our conversation. "So, where exactly are we going?" Daniel tried again, keeping his voice light. I could hear the smile he was trying to wear, even if he didn't show it. Our son exhaled long and low. "Someplace peaceful." The way he said peaceful made my fingers curl tighter into the seat. He still hadn't looked back at us, not once, and I started noticing every little thing that didn't match the boy I raised. The stiffness in his shoulders, the way his foot pressed the pedal harder on straight stretches, the slight tremble at the corner of his jaw. He wasn't angry, he wasn't anxious, he was resolved, the kind of resolve people reach when they've already made a decision. I leaned forward slightly. "You missed the overlook turn," I said softly. "I know." 2 words, flat, cold. The fog thickened again. It pressed against the windows, making the world outside melt into one shifting mass of gray. And then, as though he suddenly remembered we were there, he spoke again. "You two, you shouldn't have gotten involved." Daniel straightened. "What do you mean?" Our son's hands tightened on the wheel. "Some burdens aren't meant to be shared." Burdens. The word cut through the air like a blade, and I felt something sink inside me, low and heavy. The engine's hum changed pitch as the road leveled out. I glanced out the window and recognized the broken wooden fence along the ridge. He had taken us farther than we had ever gone, farther than anyone else usually went. My throat tightened. "Why are we here?" I whispered. He didn't answer at first. He just pulled the car to a crawl, then stopped completely. The headlights spilled across an abandoned overlook, one that had been closed years ago after a rockslide. The metal railing stood twisted and rusted, sharp like broken ribs. He put the car in park but didn't cut the engine. The low rumble filled the silence. Daniel leaned forward between the seats, trying to catch his eye. "Son, what's going on?" Our boy finally turned his head, slowly, mechanically, but his eyes never reached ours. They hovered somewhere near the glove compartment, unfocused. "You saw something you weren't supposed to," he said. "At the warehouse. I told you to stay in the car. I warned you." A cold wave crawled up my spine. "That wasn't your fault," I whispered. "We were just worried." "That doesn't matter now." The words were soft, but they held a finality that made the night feel smaller around us. He rested both hands on the wheel again, breathing through his nose like someone steadying himself. People get hurt when they ask questions. He finally looked at us in the mirror. His eyes were empty, and that emptiness scared me more than any anger ever could. The engine idled, steady and low, like a heartbeat outside a sleeping body. The fog swirled at the edges of the overlook, drifting between the beams of the headlights like pale ghosts. Daniel reached for my hand again, squeezing harder this time. Our son didn't move. He just stared into the mirror. Not at us, but at the idea of us, as though he'd already made up his mind about what we were. I felt the weight of the mountain pressing down through the silence. Felt the wind slip through the broken railing and disappear into the ravine below. And in that quiet, in that breath held by the earth itself, a question formed in my chest like a bruise. Why would our own son bring us somewhere no one else could hear us cry? The night air felt thinner up there, like the mountain was breathing against us. When our son stepped out of the car, the dome light brushed the edges of his face, and for a second I swore I didn't recognize him. His shadow stretched long across the gravel, wavering with each slow step he took toward the cliffside. "Come on," he said. Not loud, not soft, just final. Daniel opened his door first, and the sound of it echoed in that empty overlook, like a warning we were too slow to hear. And still we followed. There was a faint smell of dust in the air, old dirt, older stone, lifting with each gust of wind from the valley below. The fog had started to settle again, pulling itself into low, heavy folds that clung to the tree line and erased the road behind us. Our son walked a few steps ahead, arms tight at his sides, shoulders pulled in as if he were bracing against something no one else could see. He didn't look back, not even once. The gravel shifted beneath his shoes in tiny crunches, each one sending a ripple of unease through my chest. Daniel stayed close to me, just a half step behind, but I could feel him watching our boy, trying to understand the rhythm of his steps, the way his breath hitched now and then, trying to read something in him that wasn't there anymore. "What is this about?" Daniel asked quietly. Our son didn't answer. He only lifted a hand, waving us forward without turning. The moonlight caught on the side of his face, and I saw something trembling at the edge of his jaw, something caught between anger and fear, and something else, something deeper. A part of me wanted to stop right there, in the safe thickness of the fog, but he kept walking, and we kept following. The cliffside came into view piece by piece, as though the mountain was unveiling it just for us. The ground darkened where it neared the edge. Loose dirt gathered in soft piles that shifted if you breathed too hard. The railing that once stood there had snapped years ago, leaving only rusted posts that leaned like tired bones. Our son stopped a few feet from the drop. He stood perfectly still, back to us, hands hanging open at his sides. "I need to explain something," he said. His voice cracked in the middle, just a small break, but it landed inside me like a stone. Daniel stepped forward cautiously. "You can explain it here, son. You don't have to be near the edge." But our son didn't move. His breath came out fast, sharp, like each inhale hurt him. "You both keep asking questions," he whispered, pushing where you shouldn't. I felt Daniel stiffen beside me. Our son turned, then slowly, and the expression on his face hollowed the night around us. His eyes weren't angry. They weren't scared. They were tired. The kind of tired I had only ever seen in men who had already decided the ending to their story. "You made me do this," he said, barely audible, but the words carried more weight than the mountain beneath our feet. The ground beneath us shifted, just a soft crumble, a reminder of how close we were to the edge. My heart lifted into my throat. Daniel reached out as if to steady me, and then our son's face changed. It was subtle at first, the way his jaw tightened, the way something cold passed over his features like a shadow that didn't belong to the night. The trembling in his voice vanished. His breathing evened out. He went still, completely still. "You left me no choice," he murmured. The wind rose at that exact moment, sweeping across the overlook in a long, low whistle. It carried dust into my eyes, and for half a second I blinked, just a single, human blink. That was all the time he needed. He lunged, not with a shout, not with rage, just a sudden, deliberate motion, as if he were finishing a task he'd rehearsed in silence. His hand struck Daniel first, pushing him off balance. My arm caught Daniel's weight just as the ground beneath us gave a soft, terrible sigh. The dirt slid, my foot slipped, and the world tilted. I remember the sky spinning, the moon smearing into a long white streak. My hands reached for anything, rock, root, even air, but everything slid away from me. Daniel's voice broke somewhere beside me, swallowed by the wind as we fell. We didn't fall far at first, just enough for the breath to leave my lungs in a single violent cry. Then the slope caught us, hard, unforgiving, sending us tumbling through loose stones and brittle weeds. When we finally stopped, the world was sideways. The sky was too close, and all I could hear was the blood rushing past my ears. Then, footsteps above us, slow ones. I lay there, stone pressing into my ribs, dust settling over my tongue. Daniel's hand found mine in the dark, trembling but alive. The footsteps stopped near the edge, just a few feet above where we'd slipped from sight. He didn't call out to us, didn't ask if we were hurt. He just stood there. The wind carried his breathing down to us, the same steady rhythm he used to have as a child, when he was thinking, deciding, but this rhythm felt wrong, detached. He didn't climb down. He didn't check. He simply turned away. And as the sound of his footsteps faded into the fog, one question clung to my bruised ribs like something with claws. Why didn't our son make sure we were truly gone? The world came back to me in fragments, a cold leaf against my cheek, the sting of dirt in my teeth, and the low, trembling sound of my own breath trying to steady itself. The sky above was only a thin slice through the branches, the moonlight stretching like a blade across the slope. For a moment, I didn't know where I was or why the ground felt tilted beneath my ribs. Then Daniel's hand pressed down on my arm, firm and shaking all at once. "Don't move," he whispered, his voice softer than the wind. "Don't make a sound." The pain in my side pulsed with each inhale, but Daniel's grip kept me still. I could feel the warmth of his palm, the way his fingers trembled just slightly. And somehow that frightened me more than the fall itself. Daniel had always been the steady one, the one who didn't shake. The slope around us was a mess of broken twigs and scattered gravel. A few feet above my head, a tree root jutted out from the hillside like a hand reaching through the dirt. Maybe that was what slowed our fall. Maybe it was luck. Or maybe it was the same quiet mercy that had followed us our whole lives, guiding us even when we didn't deserve it. I tried to speak, tried to ask if he was hurt. But the moment I shifted, Daniel's other hand brushed my shoulder, a warning, gentle but desperate. His eyes flicked upward, and that's when I saw it. A shadow moved along the cliff's edge. Not hurried, not frantic, slow, searching. Our son's silhouette stood against the night sky, shoulders stiff, head tilted down toward the darkness where we'd fallen. His outline was so calm, so still, it made my blood turn cold. He wasn't calling our names. He wasn't rushing to help. He was looking to confirm a truth he hoped was already settled beneath the dirt. Daniel's breath brushed my ear as he lowered himself beside me, pressing our bodies deeper into the leaves. "He's checking," he whispered. "Don't move." "Not yet." I followed the slope of his gaze upward. Our son stood so close to the edge that gravel trickled under his shoes and scattered down toward us. Each little pebble landed near my arm with a tiny click, like a clock marking the seconds between life and fate. He leaned forward slightly, hands in his pockets, his head angling just enough for me to see the calmness in him. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes only after a terrible decision has already been made. My heart tightened in my chest, not just from fear, but from a grief so sharp it felt like a wound. This was the same boy whose scraped knees I used to bandage, the same one who clung to my shirt on his first day of school, afraid to let go of my hand. Now he stood above us like a judge waiting for the dust to settle around his verdict. The leaves around us rustled with the slightest breeze, brushing our cheeks like cold fingertips. Daniel's thumb pressed softly against my wrist, steadying me, reminding me to breathe quietly. Our son crouched down near the edge then, his outline shrinking, his face hidden in shadow. He stayed like that, unmoving, listening, waiting for any sign that we were still alive. I held my breath so tightly my ribs ached. Then slowly he straightened. I watched his shoulders rise and settle, as though he'd just made peace with something inside himself. He muttered something, too faint to catch. But the tone was unmistakable, final, resigned, like a man rehearsing a sentence. He wished someone else could speak for him. When he turned away, his steps were unhurried. Gravel shifted under each stride, rolling down the slope toward us like little echoes of retreat. For a few seconds, all I heard were those footsteps, soft, steady, unforgiving. Daniel finally loosened his grip, his hand sliding off my arm and settling in the leaves beside mine. He exhaled, long and shaky, as though he'd been holding that breath since the moment our bodies hit the ground. My whole body felt heavy, pinned by more than just the fall. There was the sting of betrayal, the crushing ache of disbelief. How had we raised a boy who could do this? What darkness had taken root in him without us noticing? Daniel shifted beside me. "We can't stay here," he breathed. "He might come back." I nodded, though I wasn't sure my legs would support me. The slope beneath us was steep, covered with loose dirt and branches that tugged at our clothes. But somewhere above this broken hillside was a son who believed we were already dead, a son who had tried to make it so. That thought cut deeper than any bruise. The night around us felt colder once his footsteps disappeared. The wind carried the faint smell of pine and damp earth, wrapping around us like a shiver neither of us could shake. Daniel slowly sat up, wincing, and offered me his hand. His palm was scraped, streaked with dirt, but warm, still warm. Together we rose from the leaves, two shadows stitched together by fear and something quieter than courage. The moonlight spilled down the slope, lighting a narrow path through the trees. Behind us, the cliff waited in silence, a reminder of how close we had come to disappearing without a sound. I steadied myself and looked up toward the direction our son had gone. What did he think we knew? And why did he believe killing us was the only way to stop it? The wind pressed against the tops of the trees like it was trying to push us back. I could feel it on my face, cold and sharp, but the ache in my legs was sharper. Daniel leaned against me for a second, trembling. I could feel his chest moving in shallow, uneven breaths. The forest was quiet in that way that makes every small sound feel enormous. A twig snapped somewhere behind us, and we both froze. Our own breaths seemed loud, like intruders. I didn't look back, didn't want to see what might be waiting. He reached for my hand, his fingers rough, sticky with dirt and something darker I didn't want to name. We have to keep going," he whispered. His voice shook, but there was an edge of something I hadn't noticed before. Determination, or maybe fear, turned into resolve. The path down was jagged, broken by roots and rocks. My hands clawed at branches, bark rough against my palms. My knees scraped on stones, and I could taste the metallic tang of blood. Every step felt like it might be the last one we could take together. I kept thinking about the signs I had ignored. The folder I found tucked under his bed, papers I hadn't understood at the time, numbers and names, scribbled notes in his handwriting. I had shrugged it off, said nothing. The sharp voice on the phone, the one he tried to hide, arguing like the man I loved had a life I didn't know. And the money, bundles of cash he couldn't explain, shoved into drawers where I hadn't thought to look. Every memory came back now, flickering against the dark trees, like ghosts of things I should have noticed. It wasn't the forest that scared me. It was him, and the life he had carved out beneath our noses. We slipped over a mossy rock, Daniel catching my arm just in time. I felt the pulse of his grip, hot and urgent. Our legs moved like they were made of lead. I tried to focus on the rhythm of our steps, the sound of boots brushing leaves, the occasional hiss of a snake or rustle of some small animal. Each noise sent my heart jerking. I remembered the night he stayed up late, murmuring into the phone. I hadn't listened. I thought it was work. But now I could hear it clearly in my mind, his voice low, urgent, afraid, almost apologetic. And the argument, the word safe repeated. Safe for whom? And at what cost? The forest seemed endless, and with each step, the picture of him, the man I married, changed in my head. Pieces I had ignored now fit into a puzzle I didn't want to solve. Why did he think killing us was safer than anything else? I could see it now. His panic, his reasoning, a twisted logic I could barely grasp. Daniel paused beside a gnarled tree, hands on his knees. "Are you okay?" he asked. His words trembled, even if his jaw tried to hide it. I shook my head slowly, tasting the dirt on my lips. "No," I said. "I don't think I will be." For a long time, he didn't argue. He just brushed a lock of hair from my forehead, fingers lingering like he didn't want to let go. The silence between us felt heavier than the forest, thick with things we couldn't speak. I thought about the moments that didn't make sense before. The way he avoided questions, the small lies that seemed harmless, the the sudden urgency in his eyes whenever something came too close to the truth. And now the truth had clawed its way out. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't clean. It left bruises and blood and a slow, aching understanding. We moved again, slower this time. The forest floor was uneven, each step a negotiation with gravity. I held onto a branch, splinters biting into my palm, and leaned into Daniel when my legs threatened to collapse. The world narrowed to the sound of our boots, the scrape of bark, our ragged breathing. I remembered the document I had dismissed, the one I thought was just another errand for work. It had been a warning, written in plain ink, folded neatly like a secret he hoped I wouldn't find. I traced the words in my mind, imagining his handwriting like a ghost pressing against my chest. Why hadn't I listened? Why had I smiled at his excuses? The weight of it pressed down like the forest itself, hiding us, but also holding us in a slow, suffocating grasp. A distant car roared, and we ducked behind a fallen log. Daniel's hand found mine, gripping tight, desperate. My heart slammed. The sound was nothing really, just a vehicle. But in the forest, it was a predator. We didn't speak. No words could make sense here, not anymore. We crawled over rocks and through wet leaves, each motion deliberate, careful. I kept glancing at him, at the way his face was set, jaw tight, eyes scanning shadows. And I realized he wasn't the man I thought I knew. Not entirely. There was someone else in there. Someone who had survived by fear, by silence, by secrets. And I had loved him anyway. Or I thought I had. We finally reached a small clearing, light spilling in through the branches, silver and pale. I sank to my knees, lungs burning, limbs trembling. Daniel dropped beside me, leaning back against a tree like the weight of our ordeal had finally hit him. I looked at him. He didn't look like the man I married. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by choices I could barely understand. And yet, there was still something familiar in the curve of his mouth, the way his hand sought mine without asking. The forest seemed to hold its breath with us, leaves still, wind muted. I wanted to speak, to ask the questions that had been forming for hours, days, maybe years. But the words stuck, tangled in my throat. We just sat there, two people broken and bruised, crawling back to a truth that would never let us rest. I stood finally, brushing the dirt from my clothes. The forest behind us seemed endless, but the path forward glimmered faintly in morning light. I didn't look at him. Not yet. I didn't need to. The weight of what I knew pressed on my chest, heavy but undeniable. And I knew with a quiet certainty that nothing after this would ever be simple again. We started walking, one careful step at a time. The world was sharp around us, but we moved. And for now, that was enough. The road appeared like a sliver of silver through the dark. The mountains behind us vanished into shadow, and the forest had finally loosened its grip. My legs shook with every step, and Daniel leaned heavily against me, a quiet reminder that we were still alive. Headlights flickered in the distance, faint and hesitant. I raised my hand, unsure if the world beyond the trees even existed. The beam cut through the night, jagged and trembling like it knew we were broken. When the truck slowed and stopped, the door opened and the driver's eyes widened. He didn't say anything at first, just stared at us, dirt-streaked, bruised, trembling. My throat tightened. Every sound of the road, the engine, even the night wind felt dangerously loud. Daniel helped me forward, and I felt the uneven weight of our bodies. Muscles trembling, bones aching. The truck's interior smelled of cold leather and gasoline, a normal smell I'd never appreciated before. The driver offered a hand, then hesitated when he saw the cuts, the dried blood on my sleeve. Don't call our son," I whispered, voice breaking. The words felt absurd in the silence. But I couldn't let this moment of fragile safety break into chaos. The driver nodded slowly, eyes wide, unsure if he should speak. I sank into the seat, knees pressing into the dash. Daniel's hand found mine, rough and warm, grounding me in a world that had just gone sharply, horribly wrong. He stayed quiet for a moment, watching the road blur past. Then he spoke, low and hesitant. I need to tell you something," he said. His voice was uneven, almost drowned by the hum of the engine. I turned toward him, wary. His eyes didn't meet mine. "What is it?" I asked softly, the words trembling on my tongue. Daniel swallowed, jaw tight. "It's about last week. I went into our son's garage. I saw something I shouldn't have." He paused, as if the words themselves could burn him. Evidence, horrific, enough to destroy lives. The air in the truck thickened. My stomach twisted, a cold, sinking weight. I wanted to ask him what, to make sense of it. But the sound of his voice, the shame, the fear kept me from speaking. Maybe he realized we knew, Daniel said finally. His fingers clutched mine with quiet desperation. Maybe that's why. His voice trailed, unspoken. The sentence hung between us like smoke in a still room. I turned toward the window. The mountains were gone now, swallowed by dark, endless plains. The road stretched ahead like a promise and a threat at once. Headlights from distant cars flickered occasionally. But nothing moved as carefully as we had. Grief settled on my chest, heavy and slow. I thought of our son, of his laughter and our small arguments, and how everything had shifted in the span of 1 week. And dread followed, crawling in under my skin. If he was willing to hurt us once, if he thought we were weak, cornered, what would happen now, believing we were gone? Daniel's hand tightened over mine. I could feel the tension in his body, the fear of a truth too terrible to voice. We sat like that for minutes, or maybe hours. Time had fractured. Stretched thin by what we'd endured, I tried to trace the road with my eyes, looking for signs of safety. But all I saw were shadows. Every passing tree, every curve in the asphalt reminded me that the forest had only been the beginning. The real danger wasn't behind us. It was now, and it was waiting. Daniel spoke again, voice low, almost a whisper. We thought we could survive. We thought, but I didn't expect him to. He stopped. There was no finishing the sentence, no need. The horror was clear in his eyes, in the trembling line of his shoulders. I wanted to speak, to anchor him with words, but words felt hollow. Instead, I let my hand rest in his. The warmth was real. The fear was real. And somehow, in the small space of that truck, we existed, alive, bruised, holding the fragile thread of each other. The headlights ahead grew, then faded, swallowed by bends in the road. The engine's hum became a lullaby and a warning at the same time. I pressed my forehead to the glass, watching the world blur past, mountains dissolved, forests gone, nothing left but shadow and road and the faint, relentless hum of the engine. My mind returned to the garage, to the things Daniel had seen. I didn't want to imagine it, but I couldn't stop. The pieces fit together, jagged and cruel. And the man I thought I knew had vanished behind layers of secrets. And yet I had loved him, or the echo of who he used to be. The memory felt like ash in my mouth. Daniel leaned back, eyes on the dark horizon ahead. We'll figure it out, he murmured. Not a promise, not reassurance, just a thread of resolve, quiet and fragile. I nodded, staring at the passing shadows. The world outside might be empty, dangerous, silent. But inside this truck, for this moment, we had each other. The weight of what was coming, the unknown, the inevitable, pressed in. But we moved forward anyway. Every bump in the road, every flicker of distant lights reminded me that the world could change in an instant. And we were still here. I watched the road stretch endlessly ahead. Somewhere out there, in darkness and shadow, he existed. And now he thought we were gone. The grief sat heavy in my chest, the dread coiled behind my ribs. But still I let myself breathe. Still I let my hand rest in his, warm and real. The mountains behind us had disappeared. The night ahead was uncertain. But the truck moved forward, carrying us into whatever came next. And I held on.